Our guest today is Marc Aixalà, a former telecommunications engineer turned pioneering psychedelic psychotherapist based in the Spanish countryside. Marc holds a master's degree in integrative and strategic breath therapy. He's a senior holotropic breathwork facilitator and is the author of a wonderful book called Psychedelic Integration: Psychotherapy for Non-Ordinary States. With extensive clinical experience, Marc has worked with psilocybin, magic mushrooms, for depression and trained with MAPS in the therapeutic use of MDMA for PTSD. He also plays a key role at ICEERS, which is the International Centre for Ethnobotanical Education, Research and Service. He co-founded the Integration and Support Service and developed their integration training program. In this conversation today, we focus on what Marc is best known for: integration. So what is it? It's not just a psychedelic practice, it's an ongoing process of healing, it's meaning making, it's growth in our everyday life. And we explore how integration can support those working with psychedelics to foster wholeness and self-awareness, as well as how it can offer a grounding framework for people navigating challenging or destabilizing life experiences. We also unpack the difference between factual truth and emotional truth, and talk about how trauma, when approached intentionally and skillfully, it can actually open the door to post-traumatic growth. This is the healing mindset. Let's get into it. All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Healing Mindset. I'm here with Marc Aixalà, and we've just been chatting in a really nice way about what we have upcoming. So, Marc, thanks for joining me. How are you doing today?
Thank you so much for the invitation, David. It's a pleasure to be here. Looking forward for this conversation.
Yeah. So I've been doing some research. I just told you like my top 6 or 7 things I'd love to talk to you about, and you said yes to all of them. So God knows if we've got enough time. But let's give it a try. The easiest thing to start with is, I'd love you to introduce yourself to everybody. So who are you, Marc Aixalà?
Yeah.
And how on earth did you become a psychedelic therapist specializing in integration?
Well, that's a long story. I wasn't originally a therapist. I started my career as an engineer. So I studied telecommunications engineering back in year 2000. And that took me some good 6 years. But through that period, I discovered non-ordinary states of consciousness through psychedelics and holotropic breathwork. And that definitely created a deep interest for this subject. And that led me to study psychology, go back to university, become a psychologist, become a therapist, be involved in the harm reduction scene, be involved in holotropic breathwork trainings, and eventually finding my way into being an official psychedelic therapist in clinical trials. So this is a long story short, but it's been a story of being persistent and really wanting to be part of the psychedelic renaissance, as they call it now, but the psychedelic movement. So I spend most of my time doing, I would say, 3 things. One is psychotherapy. I have my practice in Barcelona, and I also see clients online. So in that sense, I'm a regular therapist. And I see people that have anxiety, depression, couples issues, teenagers with conflicts with the family. So regular psychotherapy. Then I work for clinical trials, training psychedelic therapists, and working as a therapist in this moment for treatment-resistant depression with psilocybin. So that also is something that I do for a substantial amount of time. And then I collaborate with ICEERS, which is the International Center for Ethnobotanical Education, Research and Service, and I teach integration therapy through a program that we have there. So I would say that this is mostly what I do. Then I also offer holotropic breathwork trainings and workshops, and that is another activity that is quite consistent in what I do. So I would say that practicing psychotherapy and teaching about psychotherapy, psychedelic and non-psychedelic related, that's mostly what I do.
Beautiful. And overall, Marc, what I hope we can talk about is the human experience that transcends whether or not someone's using psychedelics. As a therapist specializing in healing, I'd love us to explore, how do people heal? What is it that actually happens, and how do we help them as practitioners? And because you're so famous for integration, I think I'd like us to start off by looking at integration. So what does that mean? Integration for someone using psychedelics, but just for a normal human being that's never heard of psychedelics, that's never really tried psychedelics. Are they integrating? So to start off, tell us about the book you wrote about integration. I know it was psychedelic focused, but let's just feel into what this topic of integration is actually about, and mention, why that book was written by you, because it's a beautifully written book.
Yeah, thank you for the question. The work around integration happened organically for me. So it's not that I was aiming specifically at working in that particular field. I was collaborating with ICERS, that foundation that I was telling you about, and my collaboration had to do with creating content, writing for the website, and supporting the organization. And then we started receiving emails from people that would report their difficult experiences with ayahuasca and other psychedelics. And me being a psychologist in training back then, I was naturally the one that was answering those emails and those phone calls. So I would say that I started working in integration before even knowing the word integration. It was mostly supporting people that were experiencing some sort of challenges after their psychedelic experiences. That, again, long story short, became some sort of career. I started researching into integration, looking for tools, techniques, approaches that could support people that were experiencing challenges after psychedelics. And for, I would say, over a decade, that was a field in which I specialized. And eventually the book came to somehow summarize and reflect the experience I had accumulated over the last decade working in integration. So integration for me came mostly from a challenging perspective, like people experiencing challenges and needing some support. So my book is very much focused on how to support people experiencing difficulties after psychedelic experiences. But integration in a way has to do with incorporating the insights of any meaningful experience. This could be a psychedelic experience, it could be a traumatic event, it could be marriage, it could be having kids. How do we integrate, how do we adapt to something that is impactful and profound? How do we create a new identity? How we create a new stability around that experience that maybe has shaken some of the foundations of who we are. Again, this is very common in the psychedelic field to talk about integration, but I think that there's many things that we need to work to integrate, to make part of our life. So I think that integration is a broader topic, not only psychedelic. And you were talking about healing. I think that what we psychotherapists do is support people to somehow promote change. People, when they go into therapy or they want to have psychedelic experiences, in the end, they're looking for change. They're looking for transformation. Something is not working, and they want to find a shift that will allow them to live in a better way. So that's always been for me the main interest in therapy, how to promote change. I think that psychedelics can be fantastic tools to promote change. Psychedelics or any experience in non-ordinary state of consciousness. It could be meditation, could be breathwork, could be many different techniques. So I think that these are good tools to promote change, but they are not the objective in itself. So it's not that the end is the psychedelic experience itself. It's mostly what this can catalyze, what this can help us with in order to live a more full and joyful life.
Beautifully said. So I guess the answer to the question, can somebody integrate, or are we integrating life without psychedelics? The answer is yes, we are. And you gave that great example of becoming a father. So we were just talking about, being fathers and how it's affected our lives. And we were saying it's almost like having our lives, I said, having my life turned upside down and taking many years to kind of catch up with what my life actually is compared to what it used to be like before I became a father. And my oldest son is 11 years old now, and I'm still trying to catch up with who am I supposed to be? and then it's going to change next year when he's 12. I need to be different now. The relationship changes, but it taps into different parts of me, and it really taps into my shadow side, my patience, my love, my I think my ability to separate my past from my present as well, my own relationship with my dad. It's like deep therapeutic opportunity to integrate me as a father. And what kind of father am I going to be? depends how much I integrate my shit, how open I can be. And so I think something about integration that came into my mind when you were talking, Mark. Integration gives us this formal permission to be open to processing life in all the ways that it could be most deeply, beautifully, freely lived and expressed through us. So that in our relationships with our son and our colleagues at work and with our own inner child, we have more peace, we have more psychological flexibility. Our body feels a bit less triggered by challenging situations at bedtime when the kids should be asleep, So talking about that, what's some of your processes of integration as a father, as a human being, as a man? What's taught you the most as you've been integrating in your life?
I like how you put it, because I totally agree that integration is a process. Yeah, there seems to be a lot of focus nowadays on the psychedelic experience itself. Yeah, or in a transcendent experience, you go to a retreat, you have a powerful practice that induces a powerful experience inside of you. So we put a lot of attention on that experience and how spectacular it can be. We put less emphasis and less focus on what happens next. Yeah, the challenges in actually making that experience last, or that experience having a meaningful impact in our lives. And integration is a process. It's not something that it's linear, that we spend, I don't know, a certain number of hours working with a therapist or reflecting on the experience or journaling about it, and then the experience is integrated. I think that integration, in a way, is becoming one with the things that we have lived, having a sense of coherence, of being, at peace with who we are and what's going on in our lives. Therefore, it's an ongoing process. I don't think that we never cease to integrate any experience. In a way, experiences, like deep and meaningful experiences, can unfold through many, many years. As you say, being a father can confront you progressively with different aspects of who you are and who you have been, and your family and your ancestors and, everything. Also, psychedelic experience can be interpreted and understood and integrated in a certain way today, but 3 years, 4 years, 10 years from that experience, maybe certain life circumstances allow you to see other aspects of that experience that could not have yet unfolded because you were not at a place of being able to comprehend that. So integration, as any transformation, is a progressive process. It is a process that happens in time, and we are also agents of this process. As we transform, as we grow, and as we experience things as they happen outside of us, we also integrate our past experiences.
Beautiful. So, yeah.
I was wondering what experiences have impacted me the most, and definitely being a father is in the top 3, I would say. Yeah, maybe the top 1. Because it's something that you cannot deny that has happened. Yeah, you cannot forget about it. You can forget about the psychedelic journey, but you cannot forget that you have a kid that needs your attention, that wants to be with you, that needs to be fed, that needs to sleep, that needs to be taken to the doctor. So that is a very real sort of commitment with something that has appeared in your life. But yeah, I think that there's certain elements that have impacted very much my life. Definitely experiences in non-ordinary state of consciousness through psychedelics and through holotropic breathwork, and the ongoing process of integrating them. So I could not really single a one particular experience, one event that has been like transformative. I'm more interested in the ongoing process, of how the decisions I took 20 years ago have led me to the place that I'm here today. And how I have transformed and evolved and changed through time, and some aspects of my life have changed radically. We were talking before about my becoming a member of the Jewish people. That was definitely a transformation that didn't happen in one day. It happened over a period of many years. So I'm more interested in this aspect of progressive transformation than single experiences that promise a magical healing or a magical transformation. I think that is good for Hollywood movies and for marketing, but I don't think that is exactly how reality works. Yeah. That said, psychedelics can be very good catalyzers. They can be very good agents of transformation, but then with that it comes a lot of responsibility as well. What do you do with this experience? How do you want to live and to embody and to share this experience? Who are you going to be after this experience.
Hmm.
And that does not only depend on the experience, it depends on what we do,
Part of what you're saying, Mark, is life is alive. It's not stuck in the past. It's not fixed in theories and cultural norms. It's alive, and we need to live it. It's a living, breathing thing. So you gave that example of joining the Jewish people, and that's an ongoing process, as it is for me, exploring my own Jewish identity. It's always new. It's always challenging, and that's how it's supposed to be. So life is supposed to be hard, and we're not supposed to have happy endings. But I do think we are supposed to love ourselves and be gentle and kind and caring to ourselves and to others. That, for me, is part of the integration journey. That's a real challenge, especially someone like me with, mental health issues, and my clients that I help. It's hard to be kind to ourselves. Life is really tough. So seeing integration in that way, when we combine it with love, acceptance, forgiveness, but also that idea you threw in there, Mark, around wholeness. We're returning to wholeness. Holos, and you said you do holotropic breathwork. As a question, how tell us what that is, holotropic breathwork. How does that help a person potentially with their integration and with their returning and embracing of wholeness?
Holotropic breathwork is a breathing technique that was developed by Stan Grof and Christina Grof some decades ago. And it basically is a non-pharmacological technique. It's a breathing technique to induce non-ordinary states of consciousness. It actually is part of the psychedelic therapy tradition. Yeah, so Stan Grof was working with LSD for many years. When it became illegal, he developed holotropic breathwork. So the principle is pretty much the same, going into experience of non-ordinary states in a controlled and supervised and safe setting, and then using that experience for your healing and your growth. Holotropic means, it comes from two different Greek roots, holos, which is wholeness, and trepin, which is to move towards. So holotropic breathwork has the idea of moving towards wholeness, of becoming a wholer people. Sometimes we have this idea that the healing process is going to be a journey towards the light. That the more I heal, that the therapies that I do, that the psychedelic experiences that we have, that the more plant medicine that I do, life is going to become more happy, more shining, easier, But actually, that is not how it's framed. And this paradigm of holotropic or moving towards wholeness, wholeness implies everything, so it's almost like you're in this theater and there's these huge curtains that only allow you to see a part of the play, and then you start opening the curtains, and as you open these curtains you see more of the play. But the play can involve beautiful emotions and beautiful scenes, but it can also involve pain and suffering and difficult things to experience, so moving towards wholeness is somehow opening ourselves to experience a wider range of aspects of our reality, and being able to flow more through them and to accept them as they are, and to fight for what needs to be changed and to accept what cannot be changed, and just live in a more full life, which doesn't mean to only live happily. We hope that happiness is going to be a byproduct of that, but as you say, there's no guarantee that we're going to have a happy ending. This movement towards wholeness is a movement towards opening to our emotions, to our past, to our biographies, to our inner dimensions, and getting more acquainted with that, not just looking for happiness or for trauma, on that matter as well.
Yeah, by playing with what the actual goal of life is, we give ourselves a lot more freedom to succeed. So when we move away from things needing to be perfect or the best or complete, things are always incomplete. Things are never perfect. Life is messy and uncontrollable and unpredictable, and it's a bit bonkers. When you just conceptualize the universe being infinite, and here we are on planet Earth, our lives really are a mystery. And I feel like when we can embrace some of that craziness of life, that mystery of life, giving ourselves permission to be imperfect, not to need to have control, it makes life just seem a little bit more doable, just on a daily basis. How to get through today. What is a goal for today? And it might be, I'm going to eat less chocolate today. Literally today, that's what I'm doing. Like I said to myself today, I'm going to be a bit healthier. I did some yoga. I said no to a colleague at the clinic when I was seeing my clients. They offered me some hamantashen for Purim, some cakes and biscuits. I said no thanks, I'm okay. And then when I went to the fridge to get some chocolate, I had 1 square of dark chocolate instead of my normal 6 squares of milk chocolate. And I was like, oh, isn't that interesting? And that was a victory for me. That was a goal. And I feel good about myself because of that. And I haven't changed the world. And I still need to keep going every single moment of my life to have meaning. But that was a meaningful, in a sense, openness, an opportunity to experience choice and freedom and happiness and self-love. And so that's something that I'm really working with my clients around as well. And I love that we're talking about just what's the smallest amount of detail of where love can show up in our life. Just the simplest, smallest, most micro, beautiful aspect of a life experience where we let in love, we let in light. And how can we do that more and more often every day?
And that's really beautiful, because I feel that that's the paradox of life and also of any spiritual tradition. And if you want to include healing and psychedelics as part of these traditions as well. I remember what Viktor Frankl said, that it is a wrong answer to ask ourselves what's the meaning of life, because the meaning of life can only be found by living life. Yeah, so what we should be more concerned about is to live life and what we make with this, and rather to have to find any specific answer or final truth. Yeah, and that's a paradox with the work with non-ordinary states of consciousness. Sometimes in our experiences we attain very high states, with a lot of clarity, a lot of love, a lot of peace, coherence, bliss. But then we're thrown back in our lives in which things happen, like, as you said, you have food intolerance, for example, or something happens to a family member, or economic crisis happens, and that is also part of life. How do we live that? How do I position myself with that reality? How do I continue having a meaningful life and engaging with life in a authentic and honest and compassionate way, despite the fact that life brings suffering and challenges, and I think that that's a constant work. I was listening to some spiritual teachers some time ago, and there was this rabbi that said that many times we Westerners go to Eastern traditions because it seems that they promise happiness. Yes, like if I study Buddhism in enough depth, I'm going to free myself from suffering. Yeah, in a way, Buddhism has this original question, like how to free ourselves from suffering. We Westerners take it as getting rid of the suffering and experiencing only the bliss. And this rabbi was saying that in the Jewish tradition, we ask a different questions, like, what does God want from me? It's like, what should I do with the things that happen to me? And I think that that is also a very good question. How do I want to live my life with the conditions that I have been given, or the conditions that are happening around me? And to find meaning and to find depth and to find a spiritual life in that, I think that that is the really the key or the goal of any really deep spiritual tradition. Because life is going to bring suffering, but I think there's ways of dealing with it. And I see this with my clients. Many people, after having psychedelic experiences and having a good therapeutic process that could imply psychedelics or breathwork or not, but it's not that the external conditions radically change. It's not that they get rid of all their suffering. It's that they are able to engage with these experiences in a different way. Now scientists, they give names to that, like decentering, or having more distance from the experience, not being taken by your thoughts or your emotions. Recognizing that, and despite of that, being able to live with the sense of that life is something that it's okay, that it's worth living. And I think that this is the challenge, and that any mature conversation around healing and psychedelics should take that into account. Like, there's no magical healings. Well, sometimes there could be, but the reality is more that we adapt to situations, and that we are able to find enjoyment and meaning despite the hardships that we are faced with.
Thank you for sharing that, Mark. There's also a few different pieces of research about religion and spirituality helping people live longer and happier, having a higher power, and belonging to a peer group, having a community where there's a shared belief and you look after each other. And you have, in a sense, a meaning to life that you celebrate throughout the cycle of the calendar and the seasons. And there's something beautiful to that. I want to now just jump into a question that was asked to you, or that you explored in the podcast with Rabbi Zach Kamenetz, that was beautiful, around how we sail a ship. And what I mean by that, you were using this analogy, and you're a master of analogies. You were talking about, in life, sometimes we're sailing a ship and the water might be calm and we can sail wherever we want. And we've got all these great, skills, how to sail a ship, and the ship's boat is really a beautiful, high quality, and off we go. But sometimes the water is not calm. Sometimes there are storms. And then we have to use different methods. It's a whole different reality. So talk to us about that and why that is potentially useful for us to keep in mind. Because you were just talking about when life gets difficult, because it will. Storms are inevitable. The meaning of life isn't to be happy and to avoid storms. There's no avoiding storms. So just talk us through this analogy, and then we'll explore how we can use it in real life.
Yeah, so the analogy, I think that the sailing term is to weather a storm. Yeah, I think it's a beautiful word, because it's not that you're fighting the storm. It's not that you're destroying the storm. It's not that you're, winning the storm. You're weathering the storm, like playing the same game of the storm. Sometimes we sail through life, as you're saying, and things are going well. We can deal with the situations that we have ahead. But sometimes life gets hard, or a psychedelic experience gets particularly difficult, and then we get thrown off center and off balance. And then we're not sailing in the direction that we would like to go. We feel that our life has become somehow adrift, that we have to deal with symptoms, with worries, with problems that do not allow us to have the sense that we're moving as we would like to and in the direction that we would like to. In those situations, I think that it's very helpful to remember this metaphor of to weather the storms. Like, I'm going through a storm, and right now I cannot sail in the direction that I wanted to, because the winds and the waves do not allow that. So what I have to do is to somehow survive the storm. And what we do to survive a storm is that we align with the waves. Yeah, you set the front of the boat towards the waves, and you kind of ride the waves. You're not sailing in the direction that you want to, but you're going along with the waves as they come. Yeah, not trying to run away from them, not trying to ignore them, but facing what's coming and just staying afloat and surviving that. Yeah. Once the storm has passed, then we look where we are, we see what damage the boat has suffered, we do what needs to be done, and then we set sail into the direction that we originally were planning to go. So that's sometimes what will happen in life, and sometimes what will happen in psychedelic experiences. And that's been part of my work as a therapist. I've been working mostly with people that have felt that they were in this particular situation, that after a psychedelic experience, not only they had not improved their mental health, but they had acquired other challenges that they didn't have before. They felt that they were worse than they were before the psychedelic experience. Therefore, the intervention has been to help them weather the storm, somehow survive the storm and find tools to manage and to sail again. As a therapist, that is usually the role that I feel more comfortable with. I'm not a therapist like the traditional psychoanalysts that would do a lot of sessions throughout the years. I feel more comfortable in supporting people through rough spots, to help them recover the sense of agency, the sense of control, the sense that they can deal with what's going on with their life, and then they continue on their own without needing a therapist. So I consider myself somebody that supports people when they need support, but also sends them in the direction of going on their own when they can do that. That's usually been my...
Yeah. And there's something beautiful around helping people face the waves, face the storm, and go straight ahead into them, to ride the waves in a sense. And there was another piece that we wanted to talk about, post-traumatic growth. Something that's fascinated me for years, Mark, as a therapist, but also someone with quite a lot of trauma in my life. I'm seeing how, with myself and with my clients, those moments of the most trauma, when the storm, in a sense, is at its peak, I angling the ship of life into the storm, to really letting the waves pass over me, experiencing depression and suicidality, whatever it might be. That's where the growth comes from, especially some of the love, the acceptance as well. That's where it has come from for me. And I think seeing that working with people that use psychedelics as well, like that, the eye of the monster that we experience in our psychedelic journey. Let's dive into that. I've got a lot of Holocaust genocide in my family, and it comes up a lot in my psychedelic journeys, and it's been part of my life, for 46 years. And I tried to run away from it, the storm and those waves, but I couldn't. I've tried to run away from so many parts of myself, but I couldn't, because they're part of me. So almost this storm is ourself. And if we can really go deeper and deeper in the waves of ourself, we embody them, and they help us become more authentic, more self-actualized. That post-traumatic experience that we have can become a post-traumatic growth. That breakdown that we had can become a breakthrough. So just feeling into that, Mark. I don't know if you have any personal experiences with that or working with clients. Yeah, where do you want to go with this?
It's beautifully put, and it's a good point, because sometimes we could think that these challenges or these storms are external things that happen to us, but many times in our own personal processes, we're going to find these internal storms. We're going to be faced with inner stuff, emotions, memories, experiences, or hidden part of ourselves that call for attention. And the storm is going to be, or the challenge is going to be, to face those internal realms. We see that very clearly in psychedelic therapy, or any school that uses non-ordinary states of consciousness as a tool for healing or a tool for spiritual growth, is that we will encounter these challenges inside. Anybody that does enough psychedelic sessions or enough experiential work, at some point is going to be confronted with difficult aspects of ourselves. And what doesn't work in these instances is to try to run away from that. We can try to, but usually if that happens during a psychedelic experience and we try to fight against the contents that are emerging, the experience can become even more challenging. Because we can experience a lot of anxiety for the upcoming material and trying to resist it, and things don't move forward. So in a psychedelic context, the suggestion is to go with the waves, to see what happens there, to face the waves, and to allow oneself to experience whatever happens: grief, sadness, trauma, whatever. But at the same time, we should not be thrown into these waves if we're not ready, or if the context is not safe. So there needs to be this dance between finding the right setting in which to process these sort of experiences. Because it is true, facing these experiences, going into them, is the way to go. But many times that could also be re-traumatizing if it's done in a context that is not supportive, in a time that is not appropriate, or with a support system that is not what you need. So when going through this difficult part of our inner process, we should be particularly careful in looking with whom we want to work. Maybe we need some other type of support, and that's actually been my experience. A lot of people don't feel that they can deal with these internal worlds. It's been so intense during the psychedelic experience that it's still overwhelming in their daily reality. So the last thing that they think about is to go and take mushrooms again or drink ayahuasca again. That feels too scary. So we need to find ways to work with that, with the same logic, going towards this wave, going towards these emotions, but in an ordinary state of consciousness, and in a way that will feel safe, and it will be safe for the person. So that's the kind of therapy that I've been developing over the last decade.
This is great, Mark. I'm loving the focus on the word safety, and how we're talking about riding the storm. And I think part of what you expressed on the other podcast was around having a safe harbor, almost like a safe haven, somewhere to come back to. You can put your anchor down and you are safe there. And it could be home, it could be a relationship, it could be religion, it could also be your body and your breath. And for a lot of people, they might not feel safe in their body. It might be really hard to take a deep breath because of all the tension they're carrying, all the trauma they're carrying. So our body and our breath might not feel safe. But there's something beautiful there around safety. Where is safe? So literally, where is safe in life?
What?
And I think something I've learned is like, I'm trying to learn how to feel into my body as a safe place to be, and just not in my mind so much, because it's harder to know what's going on in there. But my body is like, it's always there. My body's always like, yes, David, come back to me, take some breaths, and just activate awareness of my body and being embodied. That always feels good. 100%, it is completely safe.
And I think that that's the key issue of any work in non-ordinary states of consciousness or any healing practice. I think that the main thing that a space holder or a psychedelic therapist or a shaman does is create layers of safety. I think that the better psychedelic therapists are probably those that can create a really big sense of safety. And safety has different layers, as you say. It can start in your own body, your own physical sensations. It can also be an interpersonal thing, how we relate to each other, how respected, how seen, how included you feel in the relationship with the person that's taking care of you, in the organization that you're working in. For example, it is different to work on the underground, like underground therapists in a country where psychedelics are completely illegal, than to work as I do in a hospital with all the regulations and everything that we do is legal. That's another level of safety, So creating different layers of safety, in the end, that is going to be conveyed to the client, to the participant, and that's what's going to allow them to really go into these difficult experiences. So the issue of how to become a good therapist or good psychedelic practitioner, I think that it's reduced to how to create the highest level of sense of safety that you can for the participant, because in the end, that's what's gonna allow people to go deep inside themselves.
All right, let's take this word safe and safety in a different direction. So you and I both love psytrance, psychedelic trance music. I've never been to a trance festival or psytrance festival. I really want to. I watch the videos of Asterix and the Boom Festival on YouTube, and it's amazing. At a lot of these psychedelic trance festivals, there are teams of people providing harm reduction services for helping people that use psychedelics that they might be having a difficult time. So in Israel, there's actually a group of those people called Safe Shore.
Yeah, I know.
And as we're just talking about safety, it's like, yeah, Safe Shore. And there's another group called Anashim Tovim, good people. It's like just safety because we're good people. You were part of a team at the Boom Festival called Cosmic Air. So I'd love to hear about, that is one of the biggest psytrance festivals in the world. Tell us about how many people are there, what are some of the experiences they're going through, and how on earth do you provide psychedelic safety to people at a trance festival with the music playing with thousands of people over the place? Like, what were some of the tools that you used? Because this is different to psychotherapy.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is maybe one of the jobs that I had that has been more exciting and one of the settings that I've enjoyed the most, so I'm very passionate about it. Let me start by saying that I know the guys that run the Safe Shore service, Igal Tartakovsky and Nir Tatmor, good friends from Israel. We've done some work together sometimes, and they do amazing work in supporting people in difficult situations at parties. And yeah, when looking into a psytrance festival, it can seem like a very unsafe place. Loud music, not any sort of supervision for people taking substances. So you can imagine Boom Festival, it gathers around 40,000 people. Sometimes less, a little bit more. 40,000 people spending a week there, taking all sorts of substances without any sort of control, mixing substances, setting with loud music, different stages that play music for around 20 hours a day for 7 days, laser shows, people dressed up in different and weird ways, so art performances. You can imagine that this is really far from a very controlled setting as an office or a dosing room in a hospital in which you have 2 therapies for 1 participant. But still, the idea of safety, I think that it applies there. Yeah, I think that the psytrance scene has its own wisdom. I see it almost like a modern ritual in which people have learned to create a huge container to hold these sort of experiences. And although it can seem very harsh, there's also certain elements that contribute to the overall safety. For example, one that really struck me was the respect that you receive from the crowd. So you can see somebody tripping really hard on whatever substance, doing weird stuff in the middle of the road, or playing with a tree, or talking to a fountain. But this person is not going to be interrupted, not going to be laughed at, not judged. There's not going to be any sort of external intervention that's going to make their experience difficult, because most people understand that you could be that guy in a few hours, or maybe you were that guy the day before. So there's this idea that we're all supporting each other here, and that creates a sense of safety that a lot of people perceive a setting like Boom like a really safe space to take psychedelics, because you know that you can take it there. Nobody's going to interrupt you. You have more intense music, you have softer music, you have nature, you have your tent, you have food that is offered, and you have a week in which you can spend time there. So the idea of having this huge city that is holding you is part of the safety. Yeah. And I think that there's a lot of wisdom in this recreational / psychonautica use of psychedelics on how to create big containers for a lot of people doing intense stuff. Yeah. Similarly to what the ayahuasca churches do, Santo Daime, the Unión de Vegetal, they orchestrate really big ceremonies. You can have hundreds of people drinking ayahuasca at the same time. How is that safe? How are they able to contain these experiences? Well, there's a certain wisdom on how to conduct, how to hold big ceremonies, and I think that psytrance has some of that, which that's what I find very, very exciting. Also because it's a non-hierarchical space, which is interesting. To have a space in which thousands of people can take drugs at the same time. Nobody is ruling the thing, but still it holds everybody and allows people to have safe experiences. That is something to be studied. Yeah. That said, research at Cosmic Air showed that about 1% of participants would run into some psychological difficulties during the festival. So you can imagine that if that's 40,000 people attending the festival, 1% means 400 people. Yeah, so 400 people are going to end up at Cosmic Air at some point. My experiences at Cosmic Air have been really intense. I always say that I saw more stuff 1 week in Cosmic Air than a year working in a mental hospital when I was doing my graduate internship. Yeah. Because you see really intense manifestations, and how to support these people. Most of the times it has to do with creating a space, like a physical space, a space that is separated somehow from the festival, that is more quiet, that there's less intrusion of people, music, and stimuli. And sometimes people just need to have their physical needs addressed, like people that might have lost their clothes and they are being exposed to the sun or to the heat or to the cold. Yeah. So clothing, water, food, rest, and a quiet place to sit down and receive some sort of comforting conversation. Yeah. People can become confused, disoriented, lose their tent, lose their friends, and have spent many hours on their own, not knowing where to go. And some people will go into very acute situations, like becoming aggressive, becoming completely confused. And in a context, in a city context, for example, if somebody would run into these sort of experiences, it's very easy that you're going to be taken into a hospital. You're going to be dosed with antipsychotics and maybe put in a hospital for several days. In that context, we understand that what needs to happen is to allow a safe space for completing the experience. So usually the approaches that we have are non-pharmacological. They are psychological, supportive, providing time, space, and containment for people to go through their experiences. And we usually have not had, although there's been a lot of intense experiences, we've had maybe a couple of problematic cases that have required support, additional support after the festival. These would most likely be people that had already experienced some mental health problems in the past, some people that had taken antipsychotics and they stopped taking them for the festival, or people that had some sort of psychotic disorder that somehow got triggered again during the festival. But that's a really small percentage of the people that come to Cosmic Air. So it is surprising because you see very, very intense stuff, but you also see very positive resolutions in the span of some hours or some days.
Thank you for that work, Mark. That's really beautiful that you've been there helping people through their most challenging moments. We've got just enough time for one more question.
Right.
I want to explore the topic of factual truth versus emotional truth. And that's something that you've taught about and written about already. And where I'm thinking around this, in the past, I have tended to speak badly about cognitive behavioral therapy because it's very limited. But recently, I've started bringing it back into my practice as a psychotherapist because I realized just how valuable it is. The terminology, the concepts, its kind of model and method is very solid. It's got a lot of data proving that it's effective, and I think it's a cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, is a good way of clients, patients, internalizing how to understand themselves better, how their mind works, what feelings are, how feelings are different to thoughts. So I kind of want to include CBT in this, particularly the idea of core beliefs or core negative beliefs, how our beliefs connect to our thoughts, our feelings, and our actions. And if we can, Mark, I'd love to also talk about mindfulness. How do we use mindfulness to know the difference between factual truth and emotional truth? And if I'm being a little bit greedy, I'd also say, could we even bring in a little bit of Carl Jung and Jungian depth psychology in understanding those more shadow aspects of ourselves and what emotions really are, how they might be kind of trailheads to deeper parts of ourselves, that emotions are, giving us the clues to find. So starting from the beginning, last question. Tell us, what do you mean about factual truth versus emotional truth?
All right. That's a fascinating place to go. Yeah. So these terms like factual truth and emotional truth, it's not me that I have created this. I remember some authors that talk about this. For example, Claudio Naranjo in his book, The Healing Journey, when he talks about therapy with psychedelics. Sometimes, and this is becoming more and more common, we see people that in psychedelic journeys, they somehow experience what they believe to be or they experience to be as a repressed memory, usually of traumatic content. Yeah, so having been abused in the past or having gone through some sort of traumatic event that they would not recall, but all of a sudden they become aware of it, and it seems the cause of a lot of the symptoms they are experiencing currently. Yeah, so that usually can create difficulties in integration because of the question, is this real or is this not real? And we have seen many tendencies when this question comes up. This is not new. This happened in the 70s and in the 80s with the experiential therapies, yeah, when people would report sexual abuse or some traumatic events that could not be proven, but somehow they had recalled them under certain therapeutic practices. So this is a hot topic for therapy, and in particular for therapy that involves experiential work such as psychedelics. Yeah. So my take on this is that taking side and deciding, or as a therapist, siding with it is true or it is not true, that's not going to help the person solve the conflict. Yeah? Because the conflict is particularly in the challenge of deciding if it is true or it is not. So then we would have the factual truth, which is what happened back then in history, and then we have the emotional truth, which is what you have experienced in your ayahuasca or psilocybin or MDMA experience or whatever, and one thing does not invalidate the other. Yeah, we could, and I think that the most useful approach is to consider the emotional truths as truths. People have experienced this. I don't really care if that happened exactly as you saw it in your experience, but you have gone through this experience in which you felt abused, in which you felt traumatized, and all of a sudden you went through this very, very terrifying and powerful experience. I think that in the past there's been tendencies of denying this. This is just fantasies. This is just symbols, yeah. But we also have the other part of the spectrum that we see it nowadays, how there's a lot of theories that are based on trauma, and somehow the therapeutic approach is to go and uncover the trauma, to find what really happened. This is not new. This is what Freud said back then. Like if we go back to our original trauma, we can understand it, and then the symptoms will disappear. Freud himself saw that this was not working, so he changed his theory. But we still have a lot of trauma schools that believe in this approach. So then the therapeutic modality becomes on having psychedelic experiences and going back to see what really happened, to clarify, to uncover. And most of the times, these can come with mixed results. Yeah, because on the one hand, we gain some clarity, but on the other hand, it can get also confusing. I'm seeing more and more elements. I never reach to the exact point in which the trauma happened, so it can become a never-ending story for a lot of people. Peter Levine talks about this in his book, Waking Tiger. He says that going backwards to find what really happened is not a good idea, because it's going to be very, very difficult to find any clarity in that. And most of the times the way out of those symptoms is not backwards but forwards. I think that this is where your question about CBT and other schools apply. Many times we do need to go back in our biographies to really go through what we have lived, kind of make a revision of what our life has been like. Sometimes we need to make some steps backwards in order to go forward. But expecting that the healing is going to be just going backwards, I think that this is not the whole thing. Yeah, we probably need to go backwards and see some stuff, but then the tools and techniques that will allow us to go forward maybe are some CBT techniques, some mindfulness techniques, some traditional therapy techniques. So that's why I think that it's important that modern psychedelic practitioners have this wide perspective, that depending on the moment, it will be important to go back in the biography and dwell in it for a while and really understand how my upbringing was and which sort of traumas do I carry. But at some point, I probably need to look forward and see what I need to do different, what sort of approaches do I have to do nowadays in my present moment that will allow me to overcome what has happened to me in the past. So I think that we need a more nuanced approach to healing with trauma, and also deepening these practices of cognitive behavioral therapy that traditionally have been kind of superficial. They were considering humans almost as robots. You do this and this will happen. Yeah, very deterministic. So I think that a real deepening of the therapeutic practice, as we were talking before about wholeness, goes in both directions. Like embracing the psychodynamic, the transpersonal, the Jungian, the archetypal, but also embracing the practical, the cognitive, the thoughts, the beliefs, the actions that we do. I think that there's a beautiful schools that I use in my practice that they say that the original trauma, or the core thing of our problems, it could be seen as like a frying pan. In the frying pan is really, really hot and you cannot touch that. What you can touch is the handle, and the handle could be like the symptoms. It's like the outer manifestation of that. But you can start manipulating the frying pan through the handle. So in a way you're having an effect on those deep things without having to touch directly those deep things because they're too painful. So I think that this two-way approach, of allowing space for deep exploration and introspection, but also finding tools and techniques that will work in our ordinary reality, is the way to go in these modern times of more nuanced and more complex psychotherapies.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for that. And you've mentioned quite a few times in our conversation the past. What do we do with it? Do we go back and try and gain more acceptance, understanding, solve it? Do we put our inspector hat on and try and see what really happened? We can, but that takes a lot of time. It doesn't always bring results. I love your focusing on the future, kind of solutions focused, but really coming from that holos place. Thank you. Yeah, really honoring that place of I think of getting to know ourselves more fully in the now, the right moment. I think mindfulness is beautiful at doing that, especially around beliefs. I just wanted to bring emphasis to that piece. Like, I don't think we give enough attention to what do I believe in, or what are my beliefs underlying how I feel, how I react, what I like, what I don't like, how I identify, what motivates me every day to live. A lot of those are our beliefs and our values, and they're invisible. But they're there. They're real. They're there. They're just invisible. Any final thoughts you want to share before we sign off, Mark?
Well, I'm not sure about it. I think we've talked about different stuff, but I think that the psychedelic field and the health field and the therapy field can benefit from these sort of conversations that are more complex and not focused so much, like maybe only on the technique or the substance or the kind of experience, but understanding that we humans are complex organisms, not only individually but also collectively. So we are organisms that live in connection with an environment and with other humans, and that's going to have an impact on who we are and how we feel. For a long time, psychotherapy has focused on the individual and intrapsychic domains, like me within myself and my story and my past and my symptoms. And maybe that is part of the problem itself. We should focus more on the we as well, no? Like, it's not that we should not focus on ourselves, no, but we should also focus on the we, like how we relate to each other, the world that we create for each other, and how relationships and the social dimension of integration, as I call it, has a deep effect on our mental health and our well-being. For me, in the end, any introspection, any healing, any spiritual work should somehow reflect on the way that we live, the way that we treat other people, how kind and compassionate we are towards each other. And all traditions talk about that. In Buddhism, they talk about doing our inner work to somehow manifest compassion. And you see the Bodhisattva, which is the highest form of sort of evolution. It's an enlightened person that decides to stay here to support other people in their path to enlightenment. And in the Jewish tradition, we have this idea of tikkun olam, to help to repair the world. And you were saying before that the world, we see that it's broken, that it's things that are not working, and we are still here because we do have a role towards the world and towards other people. And I think that in the end, that's where all our healing, all our spiritual work should manifest, in how we treat the world and how we treat each other.
Beautifully said, Mark. Thank you. All right, everyone, we are riding the stormy waves together. Mark, tell us where we can find more information about you and also about your book on integration.
My book can be found almost everywhere. It's published by Synergetic Press, a fantastic publisher. We have a good relationship with them. You can find my website, marcashala.com, and I'm on social media, but I'm not very active. You can find me as Marc Aixalà. I don't have an influencer sort of profile, but I do share stories about my kid and the things that I do and the trainings and the workshops that I offer. So feel free to meet me there.
Beautiful. And Mark, just spell your name for people and also tell them the full title of your book on integration.
So my name is Marc Aixalà, that's Marc Aixala. And the book that I published is Psychedelic Integration, Psychotherapy for Non-Ordinary States. You can find it on Synergetic Press. That's it.
All right. Mark, thank you for joining us. And thank you, everyone, for listening. It's been a beautiful conversation. I'm really grateful. Thank you.
Thank you so much, David.
Thanks again for watching, and thanks to our sponsor, MAPA Minds, a network of next-generation mental health clinics offering Spravato and ketamine treatment for depression. Go to mapaminds.com for more information. This media production is for informational purposes only and is not a substitute for professional, medical, mental health, or legal advice. If you need support, please consult a qualified professional, and we do not encourage or condone illegal activities. Please educate yourself on the laws in your region and consult a medical professional before making any health-related decisions.